Bonjour, I'm Cécile Lenné. Thank you for spending the next 60 minutes with me. My session is compelling and comprehensible from day one. I'm going to share a brief agenda so that you see how I'm going to develop that topic throughout the 60 minutes. First, we'll talk about the 3 pillars of a comprehension-based classroom. Second, you get to watch a demo. You get to watch me teach German. And finally, we will debrief together. So let's get going. What are the 3 pillars of a comprehension-based classroom? Well, when your students first come into your classroom, there is no classroom community, but there are communities. Some students might already know each other. Some students, actually the whole class might have been in French class the year before with a different teacher. So they already have a group community, but now you are their teacher. You might have some new students. You might yourself be new to the school, or you might have been teaching 10 years at the school. So there are communities, but at this point, there is no classroom community, which is why it's a dotted line. So the 3 pillars are providing a compelling topic or content, making that content comprehensible, and finally, the underlying foundation is having a structured classroom management so that you can provide the compelling and comprehensible content. So let's just dig a little deeper. By compelling, I mean the content and the techniques that you use as a teacher that will keep your students wanting to listen and wanting to engage with the topic or the content for longer periods of time. By comprehensible, I mean the set of techniques that you use as a teacher to provide comprehensible language in context, language that your students understand. And finally, by classroom management, I mean those routines that you use that will allow your community to function, 1, productively, and 2, in a way that is inclusive. Those pillars cannot exist without each other. You might have a very compelling content, but if you cannot bring it to the level of your student and make it comprehensible, it's going to bomb. The reverse is true too. You can be extremely comprehensible and talk about something that no one is really interested in. And finally, you might be compelling, or your content might be compelling, and you might present it in a comprehensible way. But if you don't have those underlying routines in your classroom, students might disengage, or there might be some conflict. You might lose control of your classroom, etc. Once you have those 3 pillars and you have established them, and you do that obviously throughout the year, but as you know, those first few weeks of school are critical to establish that, then you have consolidated your classroom community. So having established those 3 concepts and those 3 pillars, I want to show you a demo that actually has those 3 pillars all together in one lesson. First, I need you to do me a favor and download the observation checklist that is posted here on the Comprehensible online website. It looks like this, and it will have the 3 pillars: keeping things interesting, compelling, supporting comprehension, and classroom management and procedures. Then you're going to watch a demo. You're going to see me teach a 20-minute lesson to a few adults who have had no German. And you can pause the demo as often as you want and use this observation checklist to check off the techniques that you see. How am I keeping the content compelling? How am I supporting comprehension? And finally, what are those routines, those procedures that I'm establishing during that very first class to make sure that we function productively and inclusively as a community? After the video, so again, take your time, pause it as often as you need, take notes or not, check the techniques And after the video, we will come back together and we will debrief together. And you can also leave me comments and questions below the presentation, and I will make sure to get to them as soon as possible. Are you ready to watch a demo? So here we go. I will see you later. Heute. Do you know what heute means?
No, but I guess it's today.
Today. You are so good. So let's do something. When I say something and you don't understand, because I'm confusing you, because I'm just writing a word, and you're like, I don't know German, we're going to come up with a little gesture or sound. I would prefer a sound, because if I'm writing and you're making the gesture, I'm like, I'm not seeing you. But I would like a sound that we can make. Okay? Let's say Amélie does not know what heute means. She makes the sound. Erin hears the sound. Erin makes the sound, and then before I know it, everybody is making the sound, and you're really getting my attention, and I'm going to stop and help. Okay? In the past, some of my classes have done this. Some classes have done this. The sassy ones. Some classes have done. But you can come up with whatever you want. Come on, we have 10 seconds to come up with something. Oh, you like that. You like that. Okay. Okay. So when I say something that you don't understand, your job is to. And what if Rodri is the only one who doesn't understand? What does Rodri do? He starts, and then you support him. Yes, you support him. Okay. So heute. Heute bin ich froh. Heute bin ich froh.
Ja oder nein? Ja. Ja. Okay. Wer ist froh in der Klasse? Wer ist froh? Ah, alle sind froh. Die ganze Klasse ist froh. Die ganze Klasse ist froh. Ja oder nein? Ja. Oh ja. Audrey sagt ja. Die ganze Klasse. Warum ist die ganze Klasse froh? Warum? Ich denke. Die ganze Klasse ist froh, weil sie sind in der Schule am Samstag. Gib mir 5. Du bist sehr intelligent. Sie ist sehr intelligent. Ja oder nein?
Ja.
Sehr intelligent. Ja. Weil sie sind in der Schule am Samstag. Ja oder nein? Gib mir, that means give me. Gib mir ja.
Ja.
Gib mir, wir sind froh. We are happy. Wir sind froh. Wir sind froh, ja. Weil sie sind in der Schule am Samstag. Ja. Ja. Audrey, du bist. Amelie, are you? You are you? Du bist froh, ja? Du bist froh, ja. Bist du froh, weil du bist in der Schule am Samstag?
Ja.
Ja, natürlich. Natürlich, of course, natürlich. Ich auch, me too, ich auch, ja. Und Aaron? Oui. Ja, oui. Je parle français aussi. Merci. Don't worry my brain. Okay. Ja, Aaron, du bist froh, weil du bist in der Schule am Samstag, ja oder nein?
Nein.
Nein! Aaron ist nicht froh. Nicht. Nicht. Aaron ist nicht So, wer ist müde? Wer ist müde? Okay. Alle sind müde. Aber, warte, Rainer ist nicht. Rainer ist nicht müde. Nein. Weil Rainer hat Kaffee getrunken. Ja? Viel Kaffee? Ja. Ja. Ich verstehe. I understand. Viel Kaffee getrunken. Ja? Viel Kaffee. Okay. Wer in der Klasse, ja, in der Klasse, wer ist gestresst? Gestresst, schon nicht gestresst. Niemand? Niemand? Niemand. Niemand ist gestresst. Ich bin ein bisschen gestresst. Warum bin ich ein bisschen gestresst? Warum? You want to tell me in English?
Sure. This is new. Trying new things. So a little bit stressed.
Ja. Weil ich spreche, speak, auf Deutsch. Ja? Auf Deutsch. Ich spreche auf Deutsch. Ja? Also ich bin ein bisschen gestresst. Ja? Okay. Die ganze Klasse steht auf. Steht auf. Ja, sehr gut. Look at how much German you understand already. Gib mir 5, 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 gib mir 5. Okay. Die ganze Klasse schließt die Augen auf. Sehr gut. Now with your eyes closed, you're going to do a gesture. Ich bin müde. Do a gesture. Ich bin froh. Ich bin gestresst. Ich bin sehr froh. Ich bin sehr müde. Sehr müde. Sehr, 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 sehr müde. Gut, sehr gut. Okay. Ich bin ein bisschen gestresst. Ein bisschen gestresst. Sehr gut. Die ganze Klasse. Can you do a gesture for that? Die ganze Klasse. Sehr gut. Machen die Augen auf, that means open your eyes. Und die ganze Klasse setzt dich. Wow! Und die ganze Klasse applaudiert. Du bist sehr intelligent. Ja? Ich sage applaudiert und Amelie. Gib mir 5. Die ganze Klasse applaudiert 3-mal. 1, 2, 3. Mein Geburtstag. Mein Geburtstag. Ja, heute ist mein Geburtstag, Klasse. Die ganze Klasse applaudiert. Ja, danke. Wie viele, nein, Entschuldigung, sorry, Entschuldigung. Wie alt bin ich? Wie alt bin ich? Gib mir 5, gib mir 5, gib mir 5, gib mir 5, gib mir 5. Sehr gut, Klasse, sehr gut. Wie alt bin ich? Wie alt bin ich, Klasse? Bin ich 25? Ja oder nein? Rodri sagt ja. Frau Lene, Sie sind 25. Ja, danke, aber nein. Nein. Ich bin nicht 25. Bin ich 35? Ja oder nein? Ja, Erin? Ja, Amelie? Ja, bin ich 35? Nein. Nein, Klasse. Ich bin nicht 35. Ich bin 54. No, nein. Ich bin ein bisschen gestresst. Ja, gestresst. Ich bin 44. Ja, die ganze Klasse, ja. Ich bin 44. Ja. Die ganze Klasse applaudiert 4-mal. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sehr gut. You did a phenomenal job. I want you to close your eyes, please. And it's feedback time. With your fingers, show me, with your eyes closed, with your fingers, show me. 1, I was completely lost. I have no clue what you were saying. 5, I understood everything you were saying. Or anywhere in between. Where were you today as a whole? Show me with your fingers. Nobody else is seeing this feedback, just me. And what it does is it helps me for the next lesson. So show me. 1, I was really lost. 5, I got everything. Thank you. Don't open your eyes. One more piece of feedback if you don't mind. The pace, how fast I was going. 1, I was going too slow. I need to speed up a bit next time. 1, too slow. 2, just right for me. Just the right level of challenge. 3, too fast. This was too fast. Show me. For you, 1, it was too slow for me. 2, just right. 3, too fast. Excellent. Open your eyes. Thank you very much. Give yourself a good, big, nice round of applause. And Sylvie, can you tell me what time it is? Oh, it's right there. Okay, very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Good. Whew. How are you feeling? How's your brain feeling? Good.
I want to know more now.
You what?
I want to know more.
You want to know more?
German.
More German?
Yeah.
Did you ever think you were going to love German coming in?
Well, I've done German.
You have.
In elementary school.
Oh, in elementary school.
But I hated it.
You
I
hated
tried,
it.
yes.
No.
And now I regret not having it.
So what made you like this more than your experience? Because what?
I'm grown up now.
Because you're grown up now. You know it's good
No,
for you.
no, yeah, and it's
She's excited.
yeah,
Okay, and you remember, you're the students. You're not supposed to even
I
have that
remember
kind of
we had these books and we just had to
study
and memorize.
Memorize.
And it was so boring.
and boring. Very good.
I remember 2 sentences and it wasn't.
It wasn't useful real life stuff. It was book study.
Where is my pipe?
I was just going to talk about that.
Nobody's smoking pipe around.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the video, you found it productive, and you were able to observe a few techniques. In fact, I am interested in knowing which techniques you already use in your classroom and which techniques were either completely new to you or you had heard about them but you had not seen them implemented. I think it would be very helpful for me to know. And if you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the comment box below this presentation, and I will make sure I answer your questions. I have selected a few techniques from this list that I would like to deep dive with you in this last part of the session. So if you can please bear with me for another 20 minutes or so, I would love to deep dive a little bit more. So let's go back to the 3 pillars: compelling, comprehensible, and the underlying classroom management routines that allow you to create your classroom community and, of course, foster language acquisition. You might be wondering, when looking at that checklist, how do I do all of this at once? How do I keep the balance between compelling, comprehensible, and all my classroom management procedures? Of course, I mean, it does take some practice and some experience to be able to have all of those in balance. And trust me, they're not in balance every day. But I think it helps to focus on a few techniques in each of the 3 pillars. So I'm going to give you a place to start. I'm going to give you areas of focus for the first few weeks of school. In the the compelling pillar, the focus is to get to know your students, of course, but also to allow your students to get to know you. And I'm going to give you some resources and techniques to do that in a minute. The second pillar, comprehensible, the 2 techniques that I recommend as areas of focus are slow, speaking slowly, speaking even slower than you think is slow, and point and pause. And I also want to deep dive in those 2 techniques in a few minutes, because while the terms are very simple, like everybody understands what slow means and everybody understands, yeah, speaking slowly, I get it. And same thing for pointing and pausing. Those are 2 very simple terms. The actual technique is quite, if not complex, at least deeper, really beyond. I want to go beyond the surface of those words. It's a lot deeper than that, and I want to take a few minutes to explain why. And finally, under the classroom management pillar, the first few weeks of school, obviously setting up expectations is huge, but specifically setting up expectations for how your students are going to respond when you ask a question. And secondly, having a consistent feedback cycle between you and your students. So asking for feedback and providing feedback to your students in a way that is consistent. Those are 2 very important areas of focus that I'm still working on today. So let's deep dive together, shall we? So for compelling, I said getting to know your students and allowing your students to get to know you. There are many ways you can do this. Card talk comes to mind, but I'm not going to talk about card talk. These are the ways that I use. Everyone is different. But in order for my students to get to know me, especially if I'm a new teacher to them, I usually play a simple game. It's a simple game of true and false, where using pictures and simple sentences, I make statements about myself And I ask my students to decide if it's true or false. For novice, this is perfect. The simple statements, the visual to support comprehension. I might write on the board as well to support comprehension. And then there's no output. All they have to do is thumbs up, thumbs down, or say true or false, vrai ou faux. For my intermediates, I still play this game, but I use it as a hook to engage in a conversation with them. So I will ask them to tell me why they think it's true. For example, I'm French and American, which is the statement right here. I might ask my intermediates why they think that I'm French and American, if they think it's true. The second activity, and I would say really something fundamental as far as my philosophy of teaching is concerned, is checking in with my students, asking them every day, not just in the first few weeks of school, every day checking in with them and every day asking them how they feel. You've seen it in the video. That's the first class that I do. I pick 3 feelings, the most, let's say the most common feelings that I know all my students are going to feel on the first day of school. They're either going to be happy or tired or stressed out because it's the first day of school. And those are 3 feelings that I feel too. I am so excited the first day of school, the first week of school. I'm so exhausted already, and I am nervous. And so you saw in the video that I shared that I was nervous. In this particular class, I shared that I was nervous or stressed out because I was speaking German, and my German is definitely not as fit as my English and my French. So I was genuine and honest in sharing why I was stressed out. Some days, this routine, this how do you feel routine takes 2 to 5 minutes. And some days it takes 30 minutes. And if it takes 30 minutes, then so be it. It is a wonderful way to provide input and to connect with your students. If you are interested to know more about the how do you feel routine, you can go on my website, towardproficiency.com, and search for the words how do you feel. I have a detailed post on how you can implement this with accompanying slides if you need to. And I think you will love doing this with your students. I think I've learned most about my students during this specific routine. And finally, the third one is, of course, special person. Special person is an incredible way to get to know your students. But what I like about special person is that it can be very versatile. You can use it with your novice, with very basic questions using a lot of cognates, like quel est ton film préféré? What is your preferred movie? Where they just have to answer the title of a movie, so they don't need to have a lot of language to answer those questions, and you are getting to know them when you ask those kinds of questions. But you can also really bring it up to the next level of intermediates by asking questions that are more appropriate for intermediates, and by also engaging your students to create questions that would be more appropriate to their level and to the level of connection that they already have. There is a lot of resources about special person. If you Google it and Google also its creator, Bryce Hedstrom. But if you want to see my preferred resources for special person, you can also go on my website, towardproficiency.com, and search for special person. And you will see those key resources that I use as far as this process is concerned. The second pillar, comprehensible, the 2 areas of focus that I have chosen for today are slow and point and pause. I want to talk about slow. I'm very passionate about slow because as a native speaker of French, not German, as you heard, my tendency is not to speak slow. I'm a native speaker and the language pours out of me. I don't have to think about, my language. But in fact, I do think really hard because I always think about the best way to say what I'm trying to say that is at the level of my students or just slightly above the level of my students. But as far as slow is concerned, when I'm listening to myself talk to my students, I sound like this. Hello, my name is Madame Lenné. My name is Madame Lenné. So it's very slow, it's very boring to my ears. But that is the speed that we need to really tune in for our novice students. And disregard the way you feel when you're hearing yourself. Trust that that is the right speed for students. I'm going to show you a little clip that's going to illustrate just how slow you need to speak with novice, if you bear with me for a second. Have you heard of the movie Zootopia? Maybe you've seen it before. There is a character in that movie called Flash. He is a sloth. And I want you to listen for his pace. Listen how slow he is speaking and how he articulates when he speaks.
Well, I was hoping you could run a play for us. We are in a really big hurry.
Sure. What's the plate?
29 T
Number.
29 THD03.
Two. 9.
THD03.
T.
HD03.
H.
D03.
D.
03.
0.
3.
Hey, Flash, want to hear a joke?
No!
Sure.
What do you call a three-humped camel?
I don't know. What do you call a
Three-humped camel.
three-humped camel?
Pregnant.
Yes, very funny, very funny. Can we please just focus on the text?
Hey.
Wait.
Priscilla.
Oh, no!
Yes? Flash?
What do
No!
you call
A three-humped camel? Pregnant! Okay, great, we got it. Please, just...
humped?
Arrgh!
So when you speak to your novice students, you need to sound like Flash from Zootopia. And if you're still not convinced that's how you need to sound, I want you to go back to the video and watch the very last few minutes when I asked the students to give me feedback on my pace. I asked them to show me with their fingers, 1, too slow, you spoke too slow for us. 2, or for me, I'm sorry, this is individual feedback. 2, the pace was just right for me. And 3, you were speaking too fast. And what you will notice is every single one of the adults there said that the pace was a 2, just right. And these were adults. And that says a lot. For me, I think I was sounding really, really slow. But for them, as novice learners, it was the right pace. So ask your students to give you feedback on your pace, and you will be surprised that the slower you go, the more with you they'll be, and they will give you the 2 that you're looking for. Of course, you adjust your pace based on that feedback. So if I had a lot of 1s, then I know that next lesson I need to pick up the pace a little more. And we're going to talk about feedback when we talk about the third pillar of classroom management. But in the meantime, I want to talk about point and pause. So looks easy, right? Look at the picture. I'm pointing at a word and I'm looking at the students and I'm pausing. But it's more than that. I'm not pointing at any word in particular. I am pointing at the chunk of language that is in the target language, number one, or I'm pointing at a visual. If there is no words, I'm pointing at a visual. So I don't point at the English if there is English on the board. Two, I point at a specific phrase, or I point at several specific phrases or elements on the board, and I build a sentence with those elements. So for example, I could point at heute, which is today. Bin ich, I point at myself. Gestresst, and now I'm pointing at the word gestresst that is under the picture of the stressed out emoji. So I point at several elements and make a sentence that way to support comprehension for the novice. And then as I pause each time I'm pointing, I'm not just pausing, I'm evaluating. So I'm scanning the room. Probably not that obvious. I'm not doing it that obvious, but I am looking at everyone, and you can go back to those moments and you will see me scanning with a smile. I'm not scanning because I'm looking for kids who could be in trouble. I'm just making sure that everyone is with me. There was a time when I first started teaching where I thought I actually was not supporting comprehension on the board that way. I was providing a lot of language. I was 90 to 100% in French, but I don't know that I was super comprehensible because I wasn't supporting with anything on the board. I was of the opinion that if I pointed at a word while I was saying the word, then my students would not listen to me. They would be reading the word and they would be reading it the English way. And so I was not in favor of writing on the board. Can you imagine? That was 10 years ago. And look today, the board, it is filled with language. And for adults and teenagers and preteens, so students that are literate students, this is completely appropriate to have the board full of language so that they can listen and read. Two ways of providing input for the price of one. So point and pause and slow are my areas of focus for the comprehensible pillar. And now the last pillar, classroom management pillar. Expectation for student response, you probably spotted in the video one way. When the teacher raises her hand, the students must raise their hand to answer. I believe that I said that out loud in English 3 times during the video. It's important to set that expectation in English. So you saw that I was speaking German, and then I have this timeout sign because I'm about to say something in English, and that's when I tell them, when I raise my hand, please raise your hand to answer my question. You probably also noticed that, I forget if it's the second time or the third time, that I asked a question and a student responded without raising her hand. You saw that I did not go to that student and say, please raise your hand. What I did is I simply reiterated, and remember, when I raise my hand, I expect you to do this so that I know that you want to provide an answer. And so I did not acknowledge that student's answer. It was actually the correct answer, but I did not acknowledge it. I went back to, this is the way we will be productive. The second way that my students can provide a response in my class is when I move both hands and the students can blurt out answers. I used that technique just once in the video, and it was at the very beginning of the lesson when I said, we're going to come up with a sound for you to tell me when I'm confusing you, when I'm using language that you don't understand. You're going to give me a sound. These are some examples. And now, and I did this. And now we have 10 seconds. Come on, give me 10. We have 10 seconds to come up with something. And so when I do this, my students know you don't have to raise your hand and give me an answer. I'm just listening for all your input. Come on. Okay. I use that whenever I'm seeking student input. So for stories, for example, to create characters, but I don't overuse it. And I want to make sure I reiterate always, when you see me do this, this is when you can say out loud what you're thinking. And finally, the third way that students can provide a response is when I say un, deux, trois, and then I do this gesture, and that's when they answer chorally. That was not used in the video. I never used this the first day of school or not even the second day. That comes a little later when we do choral translation. So if I'm reading something to my novice students and I want them to tell me what it means in English, I will use that technique. 1, 2, 3, and everybody answers. And you can see that technique on my YouTube channel. I use it quite frequently when we read with novice, but that is not something that I would use on the first day, which is why you did not see it in this particular demo. With those expectations for how students will respond, the key is to be consistent. And that is so hard, and that's what I'm still working on today, because it's very tempting when a student provides the right answer to just say correct and move on. But what you have done as a teacher, what I have done so many times, is that I'm basically destroying the routine of I'm raising my hand to let you know that you should raise your hand. And now you're giving me the right answer, and I forget that routine, and I'm signaling to the students that it's okay to say the first thing that comes to your mind. And I've done that so many times. So being consistent, and that's why I want to talk about the consistent feedback cycle as the last area of focus for the classroom management pillar. So feedback is a two-way process, right? So first, how the teacher provides feedback to the students on how they are doing in the class. Obviously, providing feedback in a very positive manner. Behavior narration. So for example, if I'm saying, I ask a question and I've told them, when you see me raise my hand, please raise your hand to answer. And I see that 80% of the class is doing it. I'm going to say that. I'm going to say, I see that a lot of you are already raising your hand. That's wonderful. Let's try again. If I have some people that blurt it out, I'm going to say, let's try again. I'm going to ask the question again, and I'm going to see your hands now. And so I ask the question again, raise my hand again, and now I'm getting 100% instead of the 80%. And it's just being consistent with how you positively provide that kind of feedback, and you're letting your students know, I'm noticing that you are following those routines and we are working productively together. Vice versa, it's very important for me to get feedback from my students on a daily basis. And you saw at the end of the class, of the lesson in the video, what I use. So I have my students close their eyes and I tell them to show me 1 to 5. 5, I understood everything. 1, I was completely lost. And anything in between, I tell them that in English. And I tell them, I really make it clear, it's not for a grade. It's not, this is for me. This is really for me to adjust my lesson for tomorrow, to adjust the way I make myself comprehensible to you. It's helping me be a better teacher for you. And then the second way to provide feedback is around pace. And we've talked about this before. 1, too slow. 2, just right. 3, too fast. And as you saw, I had only 2s in that first class, which is great. By the way, you probably saw I had some 4 and 5s. I don't want anything below 4 when I ask for that feedback. It's okay if my students don't have a 5 and they don't understand every single word I said. I want to make sure that they were with me with the key ideas, and that's why the 4 is okay. Yeah. Sometimes when I see a bunch of 5s, it makes me pause and reflect. Like, I'm not satisfied if I see a bunch of 5s. I will always ask myself, are they showing me 5 because I did a really good job at making myself comprehensible? Or are they showing me 5 because I only used language that they already know, and therefore I didn't really provide more input and they're not acquiring more language? And sometimes that's what happens. So you always have to, you cannot sit on your laurels when you get a 5. You have to think, Does that mean that was too, like every word that I used, they already knew? Because then there is no growth, right? So just be careful about the 5. Okay, everyone, it's time to wrap it up. So let's do this. I'm gonna ask you a few questions. After the question, you can pause the video if you want and think, jot down the answer, or just say the answer out loud to yourself or to your cat or to your cup of coffee. And then I will give you the answer. And then I will ask the next question and you can pause and think and jot down or say it out loud, say it 3 times, and then I will give you the answer and we will be wrapping up this way. So let's start. First question. What are the 3 pillars of a comprehension-based classroom? Compelling, comprehensible, and classroom management. Remember, we need those 3 elements for language acquisition to happen in an optimum environment and also to build your classroom community. Now, can you come up with a definition for compelling? What does it mean? What is it? It is the content and the techniques that you use to keep your students wanting to listen, wanting to stay engaged for longer periods of time. What does comprehensible mean? It is all the techniques that you use to provide language that your students understand in context. And then finally, classroom management. What does it mean? They are the routines that allow the classroom community to function productively and in an inclusive way. Can you think of 2 examples of content you can provide at the beginning of the year that would be compelling? It doesn't have to be what I shared, it can be something else. What I shared was getting to know your students and allowing your students to get to know you. Can you think of 2 techniques to make yourself comprehensible for your students that you would like to work on? Again, it doesn't have to be my 2 techniques. It can be anything you observed during the demo or anything that you've learned throughout the whole Comprehensible online conference. My 2 techniques were slow and slower than you think is slow, and point and pause. And finally, can you think of 2 routines that would make your classroom efficient, productive, and inclusive? My 2 techniques were expectation for students' response and consistent feedback cycle. This concludes this session, compelling and comprehensible from day 1. You can continue the conversation with me via the comment, but you can also find me on my site, towardproficiency.com. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. And as I've mentioned before, you can also go on my YouTube channel to check out classroom videos with K-12 students, different settings, private, public schools, to continue growing and improving your craft. Thank you and have a productive Comprehensible online conference. Au revoir.